We are up to Kumlan Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Chav Beis Amid Aleph. 4 lines from the top of the page. We're talking about convening a Bezdin, and the first thing we talked about was when one of the Dayanim, it turned out to be that there was an allegation made against it, disqualified, and we spoke about where the other two can stand there and defend him. And so it depends when they do that. So we're learning a number of dinim regarding the star that you write, to approve another. If a bezin approves another star, how it works, and if 2 of them recognize it, one of them didn't, and so on. Now the Gemara continues. Reb Zera said, 4 lines to the top of the page. I once heard this from Rab Abba. The Elav Rab Abba demin Aku, and if it wouldn't have been for the fact that Rab Abba from the town of Aku reminded me, Shachachti, I would have forgot this din, and it goes as follows. Gimel sheyashul l'kayim is a star. 3 people sat down to verify a document. The meis echmem. Now, in the writing of the star, it said the meis of plasa havina. We sat there before 3 people. But what happened was that one of the 3 people passed away in the middle of scrutinizing the document. Tzrichin lemichtav. They have to then write what they write the star. They have to say b'michtav plasa havina. They have to say we started out. We sat down with 3 people. And v'chad, let's say, so if you sit down to authenticate a document and one of the dayanim started out there who's no longer there, you have to say that this person, they started out with 3, but now right before the signatures, this person died. And the reason is because otherwise, if somebody sees a document and he sees only 2 signatures, they'll think there were only 2 people there, and they know you need a bezdin. So that's why you have to say, no, they were a bezdin, just when it came to the signing, there were only 2. If you write the dishtar, if you write these other words, it says a dishtar was presented before a bezdin, and everyone knows that a bezdin has to be 3 people. So you no longer have to say that how come the 2 signatures because one of them is no longer around. Well, obvious that's what happened, because when the moment you wrote in the dishtar that you sat before a bezdin, we know that you presented to a bezdin, we know that there were 3 people there. Says the Gemara, how do we know? The Dilma Bezin Chotzevu, beginning Sanhedrin, that Shmuel says that the Chatzila you should have a Bezin of 3, but if you use 2, and some people in Pshat and Shmuel even 1, you're called a Bezin Chotzev, a Chutzpah Bezin, but the Bezin it's still considered a Bezin. So if we just saw the document, the words it was presented to a Bezin, how do we know what kind of Bezin it was? Maybe it's a Bezin of 2. Maybe he slipped it right, and we started out with 3, and one of them didn't make it. If 2 people present themselves as a court, it's a valid, whatever sentence, whatever they produce is valid. They're considered chutzpah, that they're so arrogant that they think that they're able to perform without a third party. Says the Gemara, the Kosabay, they use as an example, they wrote Beidina de Rabban Ashi. We presented to a bezin in front of Rav Ashi, or someone like Rav Ashi who was a Nasi Adar. In other words, a proper bezin. Says the Gemara, Bedilma Rabban de Rav Ashi, but maybe the students of Rav Ashi can Shmuel Svidali. Maybe the students of Ashi actually believe and follow Shmuel that 2 is also good enough. So how, just because they mention of Ashi's name, that they're students of Ashi, how does that mean that? How do we know that it means there were 3 people there? Because Rabashi gave us instructions what to do, and obviously Rabashi wouldn't have told us what to do if the bezin was made up of 2 people. So that's another alternative. Either you write b'moisa tlosa habina, we start out 3 v'chad lesa, and one of them is no longer around, or you say it was presented before a bezin or Rabashi. Says the Mishnah, continuing, we said before Rabbi Shua, who doesn't believe in Migre, believes in the case of pesha asa pesha hitra. He said this field belonged to your father, and but I bought it from him. So we can continue in that vein. If a woman says, we didn't know, she told us I used to be married, I'm now divorced. Then man, she believed. Why she believed? No witness, nothing. We know that if the wife stands in front of her husband and says, you divorced me, we believe her because of chazakah, she wouldn't have a chutzpah to say that to her husband. But the husband's not around, and she tells us that she was married, but she's divorced now, and I can marry anybody you want, except for Kohen. We believe it because pesha asa pesha hita. But there were witnesses that she was a married woman, so she knew, and now she comes along and says that she's divorced. Where's your divorce? Where's your get? He met his grusha, I'm divorced. Ain't in the man. She doesn't believe the miga. She doesn't have. Produce a document that you're divorced. A similar example. Amr, she says, I was kidnapped, I was taken captive, but the goyim didn't molest me, and I am still tired. And therefore I can marry a kohen and so on. The men, she's believed. How do we know she was kidnapped? We'll see in the Gemara in the next few days. An interesting story about that. How do you know it was kidnapped? It's only because she incriminated herself. But then she said, I was, nothing happened. So we believe her. The im yesh edim shin, but if there were witnesses that you've taken captivity, amen, and she says, Tahirani, I'm tired, amen, should I believe. The mission is bo edim. Let's say, okay, we went ahead, we went through the protocol. Okay, Peshach, but he did go get married, and she got married. And then suddenly Edim come along and said, hey, she was taken captive. It doesn't matter. Once we've decided that she can marry, and from the mission, it sounds like she already did marry. We'll see later the discussion on that. If the Bezin just said it or they actually had to get married, Hadejulay takes it. She can no longer leave. And she doesn't have to leave the marriage because once she paskin, that's it. We have to prove otherwise that she, because he said that she was tired, and now that she got married, based on that, let's leave it that way. Says the Gemara Melasi, Menayin, how do we know la pesha asur ha pesha hitit? Min ha-Torah. How do we know that pesha asur pesha hitit is from the Torah? There's a big argument of Migri is from the Torah de Rabbanon. Now there's a big the Machane Ephraim, and then afterwards all the Achraim, they all talk about, is pesha asur, we mentioned already in the mission a few days ago, is pesha asur part of Migri, or is pesha asur totally different than Migri? And there are a number of differences, but one of the differences would be, no, the pesha asur a form of Migri, but the strongest kind, because he didn't have to come up with a new idea. He just had to not say anything. So therefore, it's a Migri, but it's a different kind. Or is it a whole different thing? Since I brought myself in a position of I said I created for myself a position of Isur, I have the power to create a situation that I am mutter. I created Isur, I create the heter. Nothing to do with Migri. And the big difference is whether it has to be Torch Kidei Dibur. For example, if you said I was married, she said she was married, and she said I wasn't, but I was divorced. Does she have to say it straight away? Or a week later she comes in and says I was divorced? Because if it's Migri, it has to be straight away. If it's Pesha also Pesha Hitter, a week later perhaps also they can do the fact is Machlek is a Tur and other Rishonim, Rabbi Yena and other Rishonim, whether this has to be done straight away or it can be done a week later. And the crux of that argument is basically what we just said. Whether it's a din in Migli, it has to be sorted straight away. Whether it's Pesha or Pesha Hitter, it doesn't have to be done straight away. So further, how do I know? It says, because there's a pasuk, as beating a satin isha there, when it talks about there that a woman was accused of not having, a woman was seduced and so on and so forth. So the father goes and says, as beating the satin bilisha there, he's being mighty shemra about my daughter. He's saying he's being a mighty shemra. I gave him my daughter, and here are her psulim. As beating a satin isha there. So it sounds it's Leisha as a wife. So by him saying Leish hazeh sounds like by him saying it's beating a satin. I'm saying my daughter's already a married woman, so she's also in the whole world. And then I say Leish hazeh, or Leish to man, but then I say hazeh to this one. So now I'm matter her to him. So I asked her, and I to the whole world, and then I came along. I was matter her to him. Leish, Asa is Asa. So he says Leish is also in the whole world. He says hazeh he tira matter to that person. Says the Gemara Lamali Cross Varu, it's a very important rule here we have in the beginning conclusion as well, and that is that if we have a svara that is so strong, it's as if it's Mahatera. And that's why many of the Shem places others hold that a Migli is from the Torah, because it makes sense. If he's a liar, he would have used a better lie. Or a more obvious lie, and we look, clean. So, because the Gemara says right here, why need a pasuk? It's a svara. What do you want a pasuk? We want to make it Mahatera. So it's clear that even a strong logic, a compelling logic, already ranks it as if it's from the Torah itself. What do you need a pasuk? As far as who asked her, who showed her? If he came along and he asked her, he came along with matter. Says Gemara, you're right. You know why you need a pasuk? We need for Rav Huna Marav. How do you know that? So what do we need the pasuk for? Something slightly different. How do you know a father can ask his daughter from the Torah? It says beating satalish. What do you mean this one? And not to tell me that he's the pesha also pesha, because that's logic. The boy I need for the Tani Rabbi said, what Rabbi say? The Tani Rabbi is beating the satil isha. He's believed only to say for this man, the but if this man then dies, doesn't mean that she's also to marry anybody else because she's a brother-in-law involved. And so as follows: what happens if Reuben was Moiti Shemra on his wife, and the father says, "Oh, it's beating the satil isha and everything's all right," and then what happens if it's not? And then he dies. And she marries. So let's say that doesn't happen. She was married to Reuben, then she married Shimon, and the Shimon then is one of Moitze Shemra. It does not go through the same ordeal as the first one. Doesn't pay the 100 kesef, and so on and so forth. because only the original person that he gave it to, not that then he died straight away and then she ended up with a brother-in-law and then he makes the same accusation. There we don't go through the whole process of paying $100 and so on and so forth. Jason wants to know what do I need a pasuk for? If a guy comes along and says, I married my daughter off, and he has to explain to who, and he explains to who it is, that's part of the same sentence. So what is that all about? and none of that. What happens tomorrow? He comes along and says, today he says I married my daughter off, and he comes a week later and says, but the person I married off was Reuben. So we're not going to believe him because it has to be like a Taisa understood that if it's a migu, it has to be done straight away. So there's the want to say, it seems like Taisa understood it's a migu. It's a migu, you have to do it straight away. So Taisa is asking if a man, what are you saying? If a man says my daughter has been engaged, leave her alone, and doesn't say straight away to who, but a week later, then suddenly what happens? She's also to the whole world and even to that person there because she's engaged. We don't know who. We don't trust her father because we follow the laws of migu. It doesn't make sense. So Taisa says, you're right. Of course, he can say a week later. He's explaining what he meant. So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about over here is with the chassan that later on he says, yes, that's the chassan. Was standing there at the time when he said it, and he didn't make any comment that this is the guy. Sounds like he didn't recognize him. If he didn't recognize him, then it sort of shows some distrust there that he's not telling us the truth. And therefore we don't believe him. Now remember, a father can marry off his daughter only if she's a ktana or a naida. That's called kedusha ktana. And interesting, the reason is because we assume that there's no way in the world that fathers are going to hurt his daughter. So definitely that he meant that this is one I'm married to. And if you know the issue they had, 20 years ago about these people who were threatening by divorce from their wife, if they don't get a certain amount of money, they're going to marry off the daughter, not going to tell her to who, so therefore the daughter's not able to get married. So there are many Rabbanim paskin that they don't, in that case, we don't believe the husband because we don't believe that a husband is going to harm his daughter. So even though he made those threats against her and he can say whatever he wants, we don't believe that he actually carried it through. Anyway, let's continue Gemara. So basically, Gemara is saying right now it's a svara, that it's a svara. But the case then asks a general question. We have a concept called biyada. We had in Gemara Yevamos there an eidech that is believed. Your belief to say about kashas because biyada you can shecht it if you want. That's why you can say that it's kosher. Everything's biyada. So the chayv over here also it's biyada to marry off his daughter. So what I need to learn also it's just biyada. And Taisa basically says. To marry, to divorce your wife is biyada. Just give her a divorce, it's over. To get married, it's not biyada. You can try. It doesn't mean that person will, just because you're happy to marry your daughter off, doesn't mean you'll find a chassan for her. So, or a chassan will be interested in marrying her. So therefore, it's not really considered biyada. And we need this bigger something to trust. Talking about further, talk about we learned. Aisha Shamra, woman comes along and says, I'm a married woman, then she says, but I am now single. Then Mena, she's believed. She asked herself and she was mocked herself. Says the mother was Shavi and not but she said that she was a married woman. So once she said she's a married woman, that's it. It's over. How can we trust her afterwards that she's free? You're right. Where she's contradicting her original words, she started off saying, I'm a married woman. And then she says, I'm a pnuya. She didn't say I'm a divorcee. She's saying, I'm a pnuya, which means I was never married. So here you're contradicting your original words. Big difference between when you're modifying your words or you're contradicting. When you come along and say, look, I'm a married woman, and she says, but I was divorced. You're not contradicting your original words. I was married, but I'm not divorced. Here, you're saying that I was a married woman. Then you say, no, I wasn't. I'm a pnuya. Pnuya means you were always single. You're contradicting. Then you have to give an explanation. A master from the word mushal. You have to give some kind of an explanation. What happened there? Why did you tell us when you're married when in fact you weren't? Time we actually learned. A woman says, I was a married woman because of she says, I'm a single, and you I believe you know some but she explains herself why, and then menace. And Mice, in fact, Gemara gives a story to support this. Nami also, the woman, Godla, adult, she was beautiful, she was tall, and she was a beautiful, she was just great in her beauty. And she had a lot of pursuers. Obviously, Likacha, who wanted to engage her, and she just couldn't handle all these people. But and she said to them, she told everybody, I'm engaged, because she wanted to make sure that they leave her alone. The Yamin. While later, she found the right person that she was interested in, and the Vikitcha. She went ahead and she got engaged with this person. One second, you told us you were a married woman last week. What's going on? She explained, but in the beginning, all these people who pursued me were not suitable for me. I told them, leave me alone. I'm engaged. But now that people who are decent came to me, I stood up and I accepted one of their proposals. And that's called an amasla, which makes sense. So therefore we accepted her and we trust her. This is Rav Acha, who's the minister, the head of his area, said before the Chachamim, they said the same thing. If she can give a good explanation as to why she's contradicting what she originally said or why she originally said what she did, then it makes sense. Shmuel asked Rav a question. So Shmuel asked his colleague Rav the following question. What about a woman Anida? She says to her husband, Tamei ani, leave me alone, not tonight. She didn't use the excuse of a headache. She said, I am Tamei. I'm Anida. And then the next day, I guess that night she was tired or something. The next day, she's in the mood. The chazar of Amar tired. Then she said, I'm tired. Ma, what's it in? Amalei said, Abbazu, also in this case, master, she gives a good excuse for her words, why she actually said that. Let's say she had a headache, but she didn't want you to bother him. Then the man, she's believed. If you didn't have a good excuse, then she's not believed. Now, l'chayda, what do you mean Abbazu? We said before that a married woman, she said she's married, and she came up with an excuse that I'm really single, she's lying and married. There, if she's lying, the children will be mamzedim, she's committing adultery, she'll be chayiv mis in the bezin, which is far stricter than the case of Anida, which is kares, but that's stricter. So if we believe her when it comes to Eish's Ish, surely we should believe a woman when it comes to Nida. If she has a good excuse, we should trust her. What's the most like Abazu? As if to say, like a bigger chiddush by Nida. The reason is simple. Over there, by the case of Eish's Ish, if she is an Eish's Ish, there's nothing she can do about it. She has to wait for the husband to give her a divorce. So therefore, we have to trust her. Over here by the Nida, we would have thought, one second, true, it's kares, but yesterday you said you were tamei, and if somebody is tamei, you count your full days over there, and then you go to the mikveh. So maybe in this case, we would say to the woman, no, there's a way out of it. We're not going to trust. Why do we have to trust you? Go to the mikveh whenever you're ready, and then go back to your husband. The chiddush is no, we trust her. If she gives a good excuse, we trust her. That's what Rav said to Shmuel. Tana minei aboyim zimin. We learned actually that one way of remembering things is to chaza something 40 times. So Mitzvah, when we finish Daf Yomi for the 40th cycle, we'll all remember it. But nevertheless, loy avad Shmuel uvd benafshi. Even though he memorized it and he would pass like Rab, not for himself, but came with his wife, he was machmer. Now, why was he machmer? Maybe for the reason we said, because there is an easy remedy. Go to the mikveh. So he said, you know what? Go to the mikveh. Why do I have to trust? Why bring an element of trust when it's such an easy way of working it out, resolving it? So what we learned? We had this Gemara in Yevamah. Two people say that the husband died. Two people say the husband didn't die. People said that you were divorced. We're not divorced. How do they do it from the Chachila shouldn't get married? And Shachila shouldn't get married. Because generally we have a rule that, if an Eidech comes to a woman and says your husband died, she can go ahead and get married. That's because she will be medayik, she will do her own diligence because she knows trouble can arise if the husband comes back. But in the case of two Eidim, she might be lazy. She thinks I have two people supporting me. Why do I have to go and do my due diligence? So she cannot get married because we don't know which way to go. So leave things the way they are. That she's the chazaka, she's a married woman, leave the way they are. The Imni Sasla takes it, but if she did get married, then other way around. Now that she's married, so we'll assume that there's two witnesses that said that she's divorced or that she's a widow is all right. But Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says no, that since there are two witnesses who say that she's a married woman, she has to leave her married. But when? When do I say that? Sort of a penalty. She already knew there were 2 against 2, and she decided to go ahead and get married. Okay, you shouldn't have done that, and therefore you have to step out of the marriage. Even if she did it after the Bezin rule, it's still that she shouldn't get married. If she did it, she can stay married because there are 2 witnesses supporting her. Not according to Menachem Bayesi. But he says, if she got married first, and then the second pair witness came along and said, hey, you're a married woman, then Lloyd takes it. Even Rabbi Yossi, even Menachem is made, you don't have to go out. That's a question. Mechdi today, but today, here we have a situation. 2 people say you're a married woman, 2 people say you're a married woman, which means what? It's a suffix. We had the Mori Bombas at the Aleph. It's a question whether it's a suffix the Araisa or whether it's only a suffix the Rabbanu. Because Ma'ataydu, we say rely on the Chazaka, the status quo, whatever situation was till now. So in the Rabbanu who say, look, 2 against 2, let's be machmer. But according to other opinion, it's a suffix the Araisa. So Gemara has a question. Mechdi, you have 2 against 2. She might be a married woman. So what do you mean that she can remain married if she get married? We have a situation called an Asham Toli. In Asham Toli, we had in Krisis, but we had in a few places before as well. We had in Yivamis, which is that if a person ate a piece of fat, you don't know if it's treif or if it's kosher, you can't bring a korban chatas because you don't know it might be kosher. So you bring an Asham Toli, a suspended Asham, and if you find out one day that you actually committed a avera, that it was a b'shoigig, you bring a korban chatas. Over here also, it's an Osham Tolu. We don't know which way to go. Is she a married woman? Is she not a married woman? And therefore, it's like an Osham Tolu. So how can she stay married? It's like a suffix chorus. And Tosfos says that even according to the opinion, remember we had Christus or we had the Yavamas, that there's a machlekes whether if you have one piece on the table is good enough, or you actually need two pieces. One definitely kosher, one definitely treif. You just know which one. And the reason for that are two reasons. But one of the reasons is because it's chazik asura. In order to bring a carbon, we had to know for sure there's a possibility you didn't isur. How? If one of the items on the table definitely is treif, and one of them is kosher, you just don't know which one you took. So that it means it's chazik asura or ikva asura. We've established as an isur here. The ikva asura is established an isur, and therefore we go ahead and bring noshim toli. Here also it's ikva asura because you definitely everyone agrees you were a married woman. She also agrees she was a married woman. Question is, what's her situation right now? So it's ikva yisura. It's like two pieces. There's a piece that definitely was she was a married woman, and there's another piece that she might be free, divorced, or her husband died. Therefore, it's like an asham toli. So how can we allow them to remain married? She married one of those two witnesses who knows for a fact that the husband died or divorced her, so there's no suffix. There's no asham toli. So that's as far as the aid is concerned, but as far as she's concerned, she doesn't know. But he goof about asham toli kind of. By Meritum bodily, she did her homework and she says, I am convinced 100% that my husband died. Amr Rabbi says, Shnayim Imri Mei, so two people said that her husband died. And Shnayim, the two people said didn't die. Of course, you should not get married because we don't know which one it is, but in Nisas, they takes it. When you got married, you shouldn't leave, which is like the Chachamim that we just learned in the Brisa. That if she got married, it sounds like even after the other two Eidim came along, she can stay married. What about Shnaim Oimim Nizgasha, Shnaim Oimim Nizgasha? But he makes a distinction. He says in the case of divorce, when two people said she's divorced, and two people said she's divorced, Harezu Leitunasa, she should not get married because she might be a married woman. But here, even Nisas takes him. Should she get married, she has to exit the marriage, which sounds like a Menachem Bayesi. What's going on here? Ma'ishno Reisha, Ma'ishno Seif. What's going on? If he passed Menachem Bayesi, it should be all the way. Even in the case of a widow, that she has to get out of the marriage. If passed Menachem that in the case of a widow can remain married, then by divorce the same thing. So we have three different ways of understanding what Rabbi Yechon said. First, Amar Abaya. Abaya said, I'll tell you, Rabbi Yechon is not talking about the same case as Abrais. Rabbi Yechon is talking about Targum of Eidecha. Rabbi Yechon is talking about a single witness. A single witness came along and said, your husband died. And we learned in the Gemara before, and also we had Yivamas that Ula, the name of Ula, that if a single witness is accepted, he has the status of two witnesses. And then if another single witness comes to object or to contradict the first witness, it's 1 against 2. We believe the first 8. We talk about Eid Echadoim and Mace. The first 8 said, your husband died. So we trust the first 8 like two people. And it has the same status as two people. Now what? That your husband died and you're a widow. And the reason is because and she'll do her homework, because if at the end of the husband comes back, she'll definitely do her homework. Who could like the Amar where the Torah believes 1 had a Kashnaim is 2. And when we had a whole discussion whether this applies also to Isurim as well. That if a single person said this is kosher, does he have a din like 2 Eidim, and then if another person comes along and says great, we don't trust him at all? Or when it comes to Isur, it's different because all you need is 1 Eid, so it's 1 against 1. Here you normally need 2, but we allowed 1 because there's an agun and 1 helper out. So since generally you need 2, and we allowed 1, this 1 takes on the status of 2, and therefore the second Eid comes along, it's contradicting 1 Eid. The Haidi come a loy mace, and this person, the second person comes along and says, no, your husband didn't die, it's 1 against 2, and you don't trust. So if that's the case, then why do you say that if she got married, she doesn't have to get out? But she shouldn't. Why not? If the first 8, if you're talking about a case of a single 8 and your husband died, why can't you go get, and the other 8 says he didn't? We should get married because 1 against 2. Even why don't we say to her, go get married? Says, you know why? It's only a chash. Because Ravasi once said, what did Ravasi say? He said, Hosen says there's a pasuk. And why we say Ravasi is like in Mishnah Pirkei Avos, which says, Shmuel Katan says, Shmuel Katan says, if your enemies fall down, don't rejoice. It's a pasuk. But because he lived that pasuk, he always expressed himself through using that pasuk. Therefore, we say he said it. Same thing over here. Ravasi said, Hosim Mimcha Akshus Peh, remove from yourself all of these people that that are going to talk about you. And wagging the tongues. Don't give fuel to the fire. Don't allow people to accuse you of being a married woman and you get married and so on and so forth. Only for that reason. It's like a chumrah. That's what Chatchila should get married. But if you did, you can stay married. And the reason is because two people are saying, oh, this single aid is treated like two people. Now, so what about Gerushin? Why not the same thing by Gittin? Sefer and the Sefer, Eid Echadoim is Garsha. One aid comes along and says you were divorced, but Eid Echadoim is Garsha when you weren't divorced. So what are they both saying? Tavayu Beijing Kamisade, they're both saying you're a married woman. The question is if you're divorced or not. So you have two people saying that you're a married woman. The one who says he divorced is one. You can't have one against two. And over here, we're not going to treat the first guy like two Adim. But the first guy, what do you call it? By the case of a Gedushin, we're not going to make any special takana. And therefore, so it seems from here that the reason is only where you need two. Here, we're not going to make the first guy treated like two, and therefore what we have here is both Adim agree that she's divorced, and now you have she's a married woman, and only one Aid said that she's divorced, and because only one Aid said that she's divorced, is what do you call it? Is one against two, and therefore she cannot get remarried. And if she did get remarried, she has to step out. Rabbi says, Rabbi says, no. Rabbi Yechon was talking about the same case as Abraisa, 2 against 2. And yet he makes a distinction between the Misa and Gerushin. And why is that? He decided to pass him to rule like Rabbi Nachum when it comes to Gerushin. Even if she got married, she has to step out. But when it came to Misa, he agreed that Chachamim that if she got married, let her remain where she is. And why is that? My timer. Misa ain't mechachta. When it comes to Misa, we're not worried that she concocted the story, because if the husband is still alive, one day he'll come back. And what you can say, there's no excuse whatsoever she can say. The fact is the husband's alive. So therefore, we think that she's going to do her homework proper and diligently, and we're going to allow her to stay married. Or the Gedushin, when it comes to the, let's say she says it's divorce and allow her to get married. Then the husband comes back, and the husband says, Bob Meister never gave a divorce. She'll say, yes, you did. How do we prove that she is wrong? So she knows that she cannot really be caught out. And because she knows that she cannot be caught out, and she can make up any names who were the witnesses who she knows that they're dead already. And therefore, because she knows that she cannot be caught out, she's not going to do her homework properly. She knows there's no home to be done. Therefore, we cannot really trust her, and that's why she shouldn't get married. She can contradict the husband. Says the Gemara, she can. She have the chutzpah. If a woman says to her husband, "You divorced me," then men should believe. Chazaka, we have a rule. If a husband is standing in front of her, she says, "You divorced me," we say there's no way she has a chutzpah. So we say you don't have the chutzpah. So what do you mean? The husband can come back and say, "I never divorced you." She won't have the chutzpah to deny it. So therefore, she must be telling the truth. Why can't we allow her to remain married? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you when. When do we say that she doesn't have a chutzpah? She's on her own, and she says to her husband and looks at her in his eyes and says, "You divorced me." That takes a lot of chutzpah. So he must be telling the truth. Over here, there are two witnesses that say that she was divorced. So she doesn't feel like she's being chutzpahdik. She can always, she has backup. She has those two witnesses. So she has witnesses who will back her up. She has a chutzpah. Rabbi Asi says, you're going to Amri Eidim, a third way of learning Rabbi Yechanan. We're talking about a case as follows. The Eidim came along and said, Achshav Meis, your husband just died right now. Achshav Girsha, your husband just divorced you. So therefore, Misa, when it comes to death, Lekal Avruri, your husband divorced you. When it comes to Misa, there's no way of working out whether your husband is at the moment, we can't say to produce your dead body. Maybe it's a different country. Who knows where he is? You can't do anything about it. So therefore, if you get married, we're going to allow her to get married. But Gedushin, if you were divorced just now, today, where's your divorce? We tell her, if it's true that you were divorced today, we don't believe you lost it. If it happened 3 years ago, 2 years ago, okay, she might have lost it. But if it happened today, so that's the Shabbat says it's talking about a case where the Eidim come along and said it happened today. So therefore, when it comes to Misa, we say if she got married, let her stay married. And you can't tell the woman, produce your husband's dead body, because it might be far away. Or maybe he was taken away by a lion or something. But when it comes to a good divorce, if it's today, where's your divorce? Two people say she got engaged. So now instead of saying they were divorced, they're saying got engaged. I mean, till now she was single, and now we're saying things change and she's engaged. Two people say she was not engaged. She should not get married because we don't know, she might have been engaged to somebody else. So she should not marry anyone else because she might be a married woman. However, even Nisah, but she get married, like Tate say, you don't have to leave the marriage. Why not? Because it was Chazaka is still now she was a single woman. So we'll assume 2 against 2. We'll assume that she's a single woman, and therefore she got married to somebody else. It's a valid marriage. What about Shnaimim in his Garsha? Shnaimim in his Garsha. People say she was divorced. Because she was divorced. Harezu late to Nasil. Chatchila she should get married. If she did get married, Tate say she has to leave like Ranacham Bayesi. Says the Gemara, that's what this Brisa says. So we're trying to understand why should there be a difference between Kedushin and Gerushin. In the case of Kedushin, we said if you did get married, 2 against 2, she did get married, fine, stay married, remain married. And in the case of Gerushin, she got married, you said, no, you got to get out. What's the difference? Ma'ishna Reisha, Ma'ishna say what's the difference? Abai said, Again, like before, Targuma Beid Echad, we're talking about a single witness. Eid Echad Oimeniskacha, but Eid Echad Oimeniskacha. One Eid says that she was that she was single till now, and now she changed. The other Eid says no, that she's still single. Both saying that she was single till now. The question is if she changed her status. So therefore, you have two who say that she's single, and one that says but she changed her status. So it's one against two. The Heidi Oimeniskacha Havel Echad one. The Eid was like Makom Shnayim. And again, we don't want you to get married for the reason we said before, like which is hasim imcha akshus peh. We don't want people's tongues wagging. But Sefer, the Sefer is Eid Echad Mizgarsha, and the Sefer when he got divorced. One of them said she was divorced. Eid Echad Mizgarsha said she was not divorced. Tabayu made you. What are they both saying? She's a married woman till now. And the question is whether she changed that status. The Haida coming as Garsha, the one who's saying divorce, is one against two because both of them agree that she was married till now. Havel Echad is one. The ain't one against two. Where heretofore everyone agrees she was a woman that was married. We don't say. So that's how Abaye learns exactly the same way as before. So Rav Ashi comes along and says no. Quickly say Rav Ashi talking about two get two. Normally we're talking about two against two. So what's the logic then? But the Eifach, I'll swap it around. By Kedushin, she has, if she got married, she has to another person, she has to leave the marriage. But by Gerishin, if she got engaged, she can stay. Eifach, Shnayim Ayman is the Inush is Kacha. People say we saw her get married. The Shnayim to somebody. The Shnayim Ayman Loy Inush Kacha. We never saw her get married. Harezu Loitel Chasush get married because we don't know if she's married to another person or not. But the Imni Sas takes it. If she get married, she has to leave. So of course she has to leave. The two people who are saying we did not see her get married doesn't mean she wasn't married. The lady Inu in your famous saying, just because you didn't see doesn't mean it didn't happen. Maybe it happened another time, another place. So therefore, you have two people say definitely she got married to somebody. She's a married woman. So other people say we don't know that, we never saw it. So it's really only two people. Of course she cannot get married. Of course if she get married to a second party, she has to leave them. We're talking about a case of there's a chiddush here. They all live in the same courtyard. Remember, courtyard is very intimate because they all share the same common yard. So I would have thought, at least the second period say we never heard that she got married. If she got married, we're all living in the same courtyard, sharing a courtyard. I don't think we would know. Call the East Mills, of course, we don't know about it. If in fact we don't know about it, proves it never happened. That's what we would have thought. Is Kamashallah? No. So it comes to teach you of the inch of the Mekachev. It happens that people get engaged discreetly, and therefore the first pair says she never got married. Even the second pair says we don't know nothing about it. It doesn't matter. She's a married woman. She got remarried. She has to leave that second marriage. So what about the case of divorce? Say for two people say we saw her get divorced. We did not see her get divorced. They didn't say, that you weren't there, whatever. They said we did not see her. How they she get married because the question was she might be a married woman still. But if she did get married, she doesn't have to leave because you have two people who say that she was engaged, that she was divorced. What are you trying to teach us? That I forgot. Now remember, the reason is the second pair of Adim are not saying that she was not divorced. They're just saying we didn't know. We never saw it. So, of course, she's a divorced woman. What's the chiddush? The chiddush here is that even though we're in the same courtyard, and we would have heard about it, but that if she's a divorced woman, everyone talks about it. But nevertheless, it doesn't matter. The fact that you didn't hear about it means nothing. Maybe they were discreet. So what's the chiddush? We already know that from the first part. My commercial Africa died because I didn't live in the same courtyard. He already told us that the fact that you were living in the same courtyard and you didn't hear something doesn't prove anything. Mount, I would have thought Gabi could do when it comes to getting married. Sometimes people elope or people do it very discreetly because maybe some of the family members weren't happy, didn't approve. So therefore, it's common. It seems in those days it's common that people would get engaged discreetly. So therefore, it makes sense. The Adim don't know about it, proves nothing. When it comes to divorce, she wants people to know generally because she wants to get remarried, and the only way she'll get remarried is if they know that she's a divorced woman. So therefore, nobody does it discreetly. He means that the English if the divorce, people know about it. First of all, she probably encourages it so she can be a free woman and get remarried. And it's a very exciting news. It doesn't happen that often. Everybody gets married, not everyone gets divorced. Shalom, and the chiddush is no, even though it happens less often, it still happens. People get engaged discreetly, but so too people get divorced discreetly. And therefore, the second period they say we know nothing about it proves absolutely nothing. Okay, we'll stop here. Continue tomorrow. Mitzvah.